We'll let it go. Hey, so tonight I wanted to talk about how to be able to guarantee your client's success. How many people would like to be able to do that? When a person walks in the door, they're yours, you guarantee it. Mira, you'd like that? I can't see Lee's eating dinner. I know she's eating. See, she turns off her camera. All you guys are friggin' eating. What'd you buy me? You're all chewing. What's going on? That's just not fair. That's just not fair. Yeah, so we've trained enough coaches and we get enough calls every week with people who are stuck with their clients or who just want to bounce some ideas off us. Here's what I'm thinking. What will you think? And I think that's brilliant, by the way. I think if we took the metaphor of traditional medicine, old school medicine, when problems presented themselves in the clinics, doctors tried various methods to heal their clients, and then they'd discover something that worked, and then they would share it with others, right? And that's this grassroots level learning. And so we get lots of calls from people in working with clients, and they're struggling or stuck or they're challenged. And what we start to notice, what we have to do is step back. Tara and I have to step back. I have to step back, and because you guys that have worked with me, you know, if you throw me a problem, I'm going to jump on it. I'm going to land on it. I'm going to punch it. I'm going to kick it. I'm going to figure out 15 different ways of dealing with the problem, like now, snap. And what I'm learning to do is to step back, because that may work well, but I'm now listening to the actual tonality of what the coach is telling me and their physiology, not just their words. Because remember, communication is 55% physiology, 38% tonality, and only 7% the words. And what I'm hearing in a fairly significant way is a lot of coaches who end up with clients who are stuck. When I start listening to the tonality, and I'll give you an example. Remember it from PRAC, the intonation lesson, that there's 3 forms of intonation in the English language. There is the the statement intonation, which is straight across, right? Today was a nice day, absolutely level. There's the command tonality that drops down at the end. Today was a nice day. It's emphatic. Or the questioning tonality, which goes up at the end. Today was a nice day, right? And what I'm listening for now when these people talk to me about their clients, when they're describing their clients, I'm actually hearing questioning tonality in their tonality about the actual ability of their client to heal. And Milton Erickson said the single biggest correlation between your client's success and their success is your belief they can be successful. The single largest correlate. And so I'm being very, very, and it's real tough for me. Again, you guys who know me, you throw me a problem, I'm going to come at it fast. And just to listen, because I start wondering, is the problem the client? And we say in NLP, right, the second presupposition of NLP is there are no resistant clients. There's only a lack of rapport. So if a client came in and I didn't believe they were successful, how possibly could I get in rapport with them? How possibly could I get in rapport with them? And it's interesting. So if we look at the body of knowledge of NLP and say, okay, I want my clients to be successful. And we talk about how do we know a client's a client? If all of you just turned inside and reflected on a client who you believed when you first met them that you could help them and that they got fabulous results at the end, when you connect with how you feel, how you felt back then when you knew that they were your client and you knew that you could help them, what it felt like inside. So we're looking at the submodalities of that feeling when you're talking to that client, right? When you get aware of what your submodalities are when you're with the client that you can work with, and you get aware of it when you're in the interview, when you're in the process, and you're aware of that feeling, you'll know when you're in the zone. And you can look through all sorts of psychological literature. The flow, they talk about being in flow. They talk about being, in the game. They talk about all sorts of things. But most of us, I would argue, aren't aware of when we're in the flow. When we actually are absolutely congruent with the belief inside of us that this client can rock this. And it became, I'll just share a personal experience if that's okay. I have a client who was injured by a dark force that entered his house. Now, you guys that know me, I don't judge. So if he believes a dark energy entered his house and hurt him, I'm going to work with him, because that's just all belief structure, right? And he is in physical pain. He went to a naturopath and they did some work with him. He actually went to an ophthalmologist because his eye isn't functioning right since this incident. And I've done a lot of work with him. We've done a lot of pain paradigms, released a lot of pain. But on Friday, I worked with him. And when I went home, I said to Tara, I called him by name. I said, he may not be my client. He may be outside my scope of practice. And he actually talked about being traumatized by this energy source. And we've cleared that event, and he can talk about it clearly, lucid, all the tests of trauma, but he's still dramatically troubled. And then I sat by myself for a while and said, how did I know that he wasn't my client, that he may not be my client? What signal am I getting? What energy am I getting from the universe that's telling me that? Because again, if you know me, I don't have a lot of self-doubt when it comes to wielding the NLP sword. It's a lightsaber that I love to use. So I don't have any doubt about my ability with the lightsaber. Metaphorically, if I had to fight Darth Maul, I'd do it easily and effortlessly, right? I don't have a problem wielding the lightsaber. So it's not a fear of not being able to deliver a technique if I know the technique, and I'm fairly adept at finding the right technique for the right problem. So what was it? And when I sat in there, I realized I didn't have the kinesthetic that I normally did. I was sitting there as I replayed the tapes in my head. My kinesthetic was more congruent with, I don't think this guy can be helped. And as soon as you go there, guess what? He shouldn't be my client anymore, right? He shouldn't be my client. Or I should step back a minute and investigate why I am getting that resonance, right? What has triggered me into that belief structure? So when that happened, I started playing all the tapes back in my head of people who call in with client problems, trying to reflect upon their tonality. What were they saying when they called in? And I started thinking, well, the number one correlation to a client's success is your belief. I heard Milton's voice in my head. And now I'm very, very, very aware, listening to people. And if you call me in the future, I'm going to ask you, have you been identifying inside you what it feels like to be that with that client who you can succeed with, that you absolutely believe to your core can be successful? Right? What does it feel like for you when you're with a client, when a client comes in and tells you their problem, you know that 100% without a shadow of doubt that they can have their life back the way they want it. What does that feel like when you believe that? If you don't have that feeling, now those of you who have done PACE, my check-in point for those of you who don't know is at the end of step 1. I can have self-doubt. I can have some doubts about, this is wild. And that's normally my reaction. This will be interesting. It's never, no, I can't do it. It's, wow, this will be a lot of fun. Oh, I've never seen this before. But at the end of step 1, I do a check-in. I actually verbalize it. After I do Cartesian coordinates in the first step of PACE, internally I do a check-in. Is this client a client? Do I believe in their success? If it's no, I need to tell them right there, and I never charge them for step 1 if I back out. I never charge them for that 2 hours if I back out. And I've done it with one client, right? So I am fortunate. I think I'm more fortunate than, say, Tara or Tanya that takes a wide range of clients in. Lee, I'm not 100% of how narrow your avatar is. Mira, I'm not 100%. Sally, I don't know, how wide is your client range, but I'm fortunate. I only take people who are traumatized and I test them before I work with them. They test positive on the PSSI-5 scale from the Veterans Administration, and they have a seriously messed up graph from the Zimbardo Time Perspective Inventory. When I have those two things, I know they have trauma, and I know the trauma model works all the time, every time. If they've come in and they're paying me to heal their trauma and they test positive for trauma, the trauma model will work. So my life's fairly simple. And yet I still let a client in that we get to a point, and this young guy is seriously traumatized. But energetically, I don't think I'm a fit anymore. And the worse than that, I don't know anybody I can refer him to because he's super challenging. Smart would be an understatement. Intellectually, profoundly smart would be an understatement. And heavily troubled would be an understatement. And and so I wanted to, how can you guarantee your client success? I think this gets into just fundamental NLPs. You need to know who your clients are really clearly. And then you as coach and me as a coach need to be really clear on what it feels like when I'm 100% sure that that person can heal, that person can get their life. What does it feel to me when I'm holding space for somebody and I hear them express their problem and I say, this is not a problem, you've got this. This is not a problem, you've got this. What does that feel like to me? All right. And Sally's smiling, so she's probably, hey, Kristen, she's probably reflecting on a client she's had where she absolutely knew that this person could have the life back they deserved, right? That they wanted. 100%. And I know all the pressures that we face as coaches, that every client coming in the door is revenue, right? However, I think when we start acting congruent with our kinesthetic, not not my massive PFC, right? 40% of my brain is my free prefrontal cortex. And you guys who have taught with me know that I always say that our conscious mind likes to be clever, right, and smart. So my PFC can trick me, right? It can talk me into almost anything. It's that smart. And the rest of me is dumb enough to go along with it. So, but when I connect into my kinesthetic, what am I feeling in this moment? And then it doesn't matter what my cognitive brain is saying. If I check in with my feelings, and again, so that's the 93% of the communication. What am I feeling? Then I have a far greater chance of being successful. And this message has gone through the literature. If you read Fritz Perls, this was his message. Adler, this was his message. Erickson, this is his message, right? Now you have people like Richard Bandler who say, just bring it, bring whatever. But I also know that when you get close to the source, when you talk to people who have been around Bandler, he's failed lots. But failure is still a success to him because he learns in the moment. He's okay with that, right? He has a different model of what success means. If he's immensely successful, that's a success. And if it doesn't work out, that's still a success. He learns something in the process. So he would take anything on. That's not what I do in my practice. And I don't know what you'll do in your practice. But if you want your clients to be successful, I think the starting point has to be my belief that my client can be successful and your belief. And not at a cognitive level, not at a, what do you call that when people are just around talking about how they do their business and they say things like, yeah, I only work with clients who I 100% sure they can be successful. It's just sort of words. It's talk. It's not walk, right? And I don't want to challenge anybody because that's, if that's what they're saying, that's fine. But I privately, I'd like to challenge each of you that in private, check in with yourself. Get to know what that feels like when you look at a client and you absolutely know you can help them. Hey, Rachel, can I share something about the demo I did with you? Would that be okay if I shared? Yes. Nothing personal, nothing about your life.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I met Rachel, and Rachel has a, I don't want to call it a history, but a storyline that includes traumas. And so just I said, look, you don't know anything about me, you don't know anything about us. So why don't I'll send you a link. You just book a 90-minute session, and I'll clear a trauma for you, just so you can experience what it's like from an NLP perspective to clear trauma. And Rachel is trained as a trauma recovery coach. Is that the right title? So trauma recovery coach, but doesn't have the skills to, she has the skills, personal skills. She doesn't have the training skills, a tool to clear trauma the way we do. And anyway, so when Rachel first came on the line, even though she's a trauma recovery coach, you were really nervous and agitated. You're really upregulated or unregulated. And I was at that moment 100% confident that no matter what you presented, we could get through it, right?
Yeah, even as you were sharing for the past 10 minutes or so, I was remembering I was completely sure that you completely believed in me and in my success. There was no doubt in your demeanor or anything you said.
There you go. And an hour later, we cleared a trauma, and it was quite profound, right? And at the beginning, Rachel barely wanted to look at me eye to eye on the screen, right? She was like trying to avoid me, and no, you can't avoid me. So, anyways, but that's a point, right? And so, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that, Rachel, and now I've made my camera all out of focus, which was kind of fun. Yeah. So if we break that down into NLP skills, then I think that, we talk about on Abundant Coach having a credible tool bag, incredible set of abilities that we bring to bear with clients. And I think the caveat in between abilities and results needs to be clients who you firmly believe in your heart, in your kinesthetic, that you can be successful, and more importantly, that they can be successful, that they can get the results you want. And in terms of how we coach and how we teach NLP, until I do that complete assessment, step 1 of PACE, where I get way past their reticular activating system, where I'm way deep into their unconscious mind, where I know where the problem emanates from, before 7 years old, where I know the purpose of the problem, where I get a physical evidence that they'll be successful, and then I do the Cartesian coordinates. Until I've done all of that, I don't think I have enough data, because if I do all of that and I'm using my NLP skills, my sensory acuity, right, my rapport building skills, and I've told you guys before, I break rapport with people quite a bit intentionally, and then I re-engage rapport just to see what that's like. And that's why I make my final decision at the end of step 1, after Cartesian coordinates. Do I believe that this client can be 100% successful? And I think, and it takes all of your NLP skills, I believe, to get there, and not beating up other professions. But I've been to counseling. You guys all know I was traumatized. I went through a wild divorce where I sought psychotherapy. And I got to tell you, the 2 or 3 counselors I've encountered had four counselors, shitty rapport skills. I'll just say it straight up. Just horrible. The one young lady who was really well known here in the city we live in had her laptop open, so she was typing, right? You want to break rapport with the client, instead of taking your notes by hand, put a digital device between you and the client. And it was just a bam, it was over. And I would like the opportunity to turn back time and go back and ask them at the end of that first hour, did you really believe I could be successful? And then calibrate them using my NLP skills and my deceit detection skills. And we all have good deceit detection skills in NLP. Okay, did they really believe I could be successful? Right? And what I hear, and again, in my field in trauma, what I hear from my clients, because the only people come to me because the system has failed them. You guys understand that, right? The only people who come to me is the system has failed them. I have people who are covered by insurance, but the insurance are going to send them to another institution. They come to me and they pay with their own money because the system has failed them. And so when you have a client who the system has failed, their motivation is high, and I need to be 100% sure I can help them. I can help them. And they tell me things like the therapist will say things, and you guys know the power of language. Well, trauma is difficult, if not impossible, to overcome. It's a pretty common thread in psychotherapy. It takes a long, long time to overcome your trauma. It could take years. Yeah. Right? And so when you hear that, that to me is not a belief that the client can be well. It's just not a belief that the client can be well. Dan Jarvis, I don't know if you ever met Dan Jarvis, Sally. He was a sergeant in the U.S. Army, and he lives in Winter Haven, Florida. He was on one of the earlier courses. I cleared Dan. Dan was one of my demo subjects at the front of the room, and then he studied NLP with me, and then he went on to do his own thing. He now helps people using NLP and timeline therapy. But Dan, after clearing all his trauma, and he worked with a guy named Scott Mann out of Tampa Bay, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, a former Green Beret Lieutenant Colonel. But he tested negative for trauma after we were all finished our work with him, absolutely negative. And he went to his semi-annual psychiatric check-in with the VA because he was on a disability pension. And he said, I want to be reassessed. And the psychiatrist said, why? And Dan said, well, I don't believe I have trauma anymore. And the psychiatrist said, well, that's not possible. Veterans Administration psychiatrist told him it wasn't possible. So the psychiatrist treating him didn't believe Dan could ever be healthy again. Dan had been on meds. He actually was on a prolonged exposure program at one point in his VA travels, and he was in a gap between visits, and he tanked, right? He was tanking really bad, and he called in, and they said, well, your psychiatrist isn't in, we'll have somebody call you back. And they called him back 4 weeks later. So he never went back to prolonged exposure. What's the point I'm making? The second thing the psychiatrist said is, and you know you'll lose your benefits. So what's he telling the person? Keep your diagnosis, keep your stigma, keep all of that, keep this belief that you're broken so you can get $1,800 a month? Really? Help me on that. Is that okay? No, not ever, not anywhere, not ever, ever, anywhere. And the last story I'll talk about, and I'm beating up the medical community a bit here, but I would beat them up if they were here. So I'm not beating them up in secrecy. I have a young 21-year-old client, female, who was sexually assaulted by her coach, kind of like a scene from Athlete A, but it's not a gymnast. She's a strength athlete. And in a 13-month period prior to coming to me, 4 doctors gave her 9 prescriptions for psychotropic drugs. 13 months, 9 prescriptions from 4 doctors. The worst part is we live in a digital community right now, right? You say the word ivermectin on YouTube, you're going to get bleeped. So we know that everything's being tracked. We know in Canada we have a healthcare system where we've got government paying prescription costs or insurance paying prescription costs. We know that doctors write the prescription and put a digital record in our file. One pharmacy filled out 8 of her prescriptions, and not a single red flag went up. And and the last doctor that gave her to her, he said, and by the way, you're severely depressed, and gave her enough meds to OD on. Like the bottle was like this big. I've got the list of all the drugs in my drawer. And so what's the point? So when I finished working with her, she was getting special discompensation from the university, and she didn't want it anymore. Like she got extra time to write her exams. Her profs, she was in a anthropology course that was like a criminal anthropology where you're digging up stuff and trying to find evidence. And so all her exams, they were rewriting her exams so they wouldn't traumatize her. Right. So the whole university was supporting her. And she said, Alan, I want to stop, but I can't get it to stop. I'm okay now. I'm okay. So I wrote her a letter telling her, you know, she came, I assessed her using these tools because I can't diagnose. You guys know I'm not a doctor, so I cannot diagnose. I can only assess using these tools. She went through this program. At the end of the program, she assessed negative for trauma. She participated very well. And the psychiatrist who gave her 3 of the 9 prescriptions called me immoral for telling her she could heal. Yeah, look at Sally.
That makes me so sad.
It does.
And I know it's true. I know it's true.
It does. And but my point is not I'm beating up the medical system. My point is he didn't believe that she could heal. He didn't believe that she could ever be okay. And as a culture, we trust authority figures. We know from NLP and psychology that when authority figure says something to you under 7, without your reticular activating system, the way it goes right into your unconscious mind is fact. But it also goes into our head as fact because we were told doctors were authority figures when we're less than 7. So when we're 27 or 37 or 47 and the doctor says you have X and you have 3 months to live, it goes in as fact 9 out of 10 times. So he didn't believe she could heal. How could she believe she could heal? Right? How could she believe? She went to the expert on mental struggles and he told her she couldn't heal, that it would be forever, that she'd have to be on meds forever. And I wonder if his practice was measured and monitored and he got paid on his client's healing success, how he might change his practice. Right? How he might change his practice. And so I'm going to close with that. All of you know that Tara and I are adamant, and I'm brutally adamant about running my trauma practice that it has to be evidence-based. We have to get evidence from outside of NLP. And so when we do trauma, we have 5 levels of evidence. We've got the PSSI-5, the Veterans Administration Test, pre and post trauma intervention. We've got the ZTPI, pre and post, or for you Americans, ZTPI. Pre and post. We've got the behavioral evidence. We've got the check-ins at every session, and we've got the activity card, right? We've got 5 levels of evidence procedure that the client got what they came for. And when you do that, when you're absolutely confident, when you're sitting one-on-one with your client, that they can be healthy, that they can have their life back the way they want it, the evidence that you get is partly for you. In part for you, right? To reaffirm your ability to help people get to where they need to go. All right, so there's Simone is in the house. Long time no see. Simone, where you been? What have you been doing? Riding horses, being wild. What have you been doing?
Oh, I've been trying to get on your calls.
Well, that's a long story, or it's a short story.
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, I'm being on vacation quite a bit and traveling, so nice to get back on one of these calls and get access.
Nice to see you. So, and I may have to reevaluate my decision because towards the end of the summer, my morning calls, you know, sometimes there's 3 of us or 4 of us, and sometimes there were 6 or 7 of us. In the wintertime, we've been a couple times, we were over 20 people. So for those of you who don't know, Kristen and Rachel, perhaps, I run a morning meditation, or I did run a morning meditation at 6:30 based on Lynn McTaggart's Power of Intention work, where we would take 3 to 4 minutes and get into a state of being grateful. And then I would put on music called Choco Ray, and we would do a breathing exercise and then send a positive intention concurrently, all as a group, to somebody who is struggling physically, financially, spiritually, emotionally. And the evidence, the research behind that's profound, that people at the receiving end can be moved in ways and can have spontaneous healing. The research also says that the participants in the group have massive benefit. And when I did it, I was still suffering quite a bit of knee pain. And I started it on Monday, September 14th last year. And on the Thursday, when I ran downstairs to start the session, I went down the center of the stairs. Normally I was leaning over on the railing on my right hand, worried about my left knee giving out. I got to the bottom of the stairs. I went, that's interesting. So on my 4th day of doing the power of intention, my knee didn't hurt anymore. It sort of was the crowning piece on my healing my osteoarthritis. And I live pain-free right now. Yeah, I live pain-free. I actually ran about 150 meters the other night going home just for a yuck. I said, I think I'll run, see what that feels like. So not bad. First time in 2 years. So anyways, yeah, so on 1 year anniversary, September 14th this year, I actually on the 13th, I said tomorrow's going to be my last day. I'm going to shut it down for a bit. I'm going to think about it. It has been an interesting week. I sort of still wake up at 6:20 and wander around the house without a purpose, which doesn't feel good. Where are my people? Where are my people? I miss everybody in the morning. And I think what I'm going to do is, again, so people were asking why have we decided to quit doing NLP Prac. I'm focused on trauma work, and Tara and I collectively are focused on helping coaches and not teaching the fundamentals of NLP so much. So in my trauma work, I think I'm going to reconstitute the meditation group, and I'm going to make it mandatory for my clients to join it as well. So that they understand. So many people, when they're hurting, are so inwardly focused that they don't understand that one of the greatest healing parts of life is to be outwardly focused on others. To actually be compassionate to others is actually healing of self. So I'm going to start doing that as well. I've had some, what I will call epiphanies about over and above the NLP we do, what else can we do to make these people's lives richer and assure longer term stability. So that's where I am with that, Simone, is that there's a very, very good chance that in the very near future, I'll open it up again, but it'll be, it'll have a trauma focus. I'll still do cancer when people have somebody they know, or like when your daughter got injured, when my brother-in-law got injured. I'll still do that, but primarily the focus will be around helping people overcome trauma. And I'll ask well, I won't ask, it'll be part of the work, right? It'll be part of the task to join the meditation group and just experience.
Phenomenal group. It's a phenomenal group.
It is nice. It is nice. Having said, okay, one long slow inhalation as you count to 7. I did it 250 mornings, 14 times per session. So you do the math.
Yeah.
I'm well into Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 times.
Yeah.
I can inhale through my nose and get a Kundalini effect. My pineal gland glows so bright I could be Rudolph on Pulling a Sleigh, I think. I'm serious. I get such an electric rush when I do that breathing technique, but I did it 250 days in a year, 10 minutes a day, right? It is amazing.
Well, definitely miss that. And I have to say, my daughter has surpassed beyond what anybody could imagine. So she's riding 10 horses a week. She just bought a new horse in celebration of her recovery. She has a little bit of a trouble sitting up, but she can do everything else. Doing sit-ups.
So tonight, Simone, you missed part of it, but the whole mantra tonight, the whole message was that we have to believe in the client's success for them to be successful and for them to be our client. And so Simone's daughter fell off a horse back in April, March, February. When was it?
April 16th.
April 16th. And so we meditated to her healing. And again, I always caution people, we can't take credit for the healing, but we can live in awe of what we're witnessing, right? And your daughter reminds me so much, Simone. I was in Uganda doing conflict resolution work in 2005 with this young African troop. And while I was there, I got a call from my first wife saying that my daughter, who was 7 at the time, had fallen in the schoolyard and broke her femur, and it was displaced 14 degrees down like this backwards. And in an act of absolute stupidity, the teacher, because she was screaming and the teacher didn't want the other children emotionally impacted, picked my daughter up and carried her to the car with a broken femur. And so the femoral artery is laying over top of this break. So Had the femoral artery broke, she would have bled out in less than 4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm in Uganda. I'm in Kampala, Uganda, staying at a guest house. And there was this group of missionaries, hardcore missionaries. I mean, these were Christian missionaries of the hardest form. They were hardcore. They were out working 18 hours a day doing their thing. And they heard my plight. I told the woman I was working with, and then she told this group. And they came to me and said, would it be okay if we prayed for your daughter? And I said, yeah, absolutely, it'd be okay. Because I wasn't going to get home, and my daughter had to go into surgery that night. And what they did is they put 2 titanium rods in her leg that crossed twice. They formed this beautiful shape. And so they prayed for 3 hours. There was like 20 of them in a circle who prayed for 3 hours. And I just did what I did. I stayed focused, and me focusing my positive intentions to my daughter. And when I would talk to my wife, I say, how are things going? And they said, well, it's amazing. Emma's her name. Emma came out of surgery and hasn't had to need painkillers. So Sigmund would say, eh? How is that possible, you say? And I got home a couple days later. It was my 50th birthday. I got home. My daughter's in a wheelchair when I get home. She has no cast on. Femoral break, 14 degrees displaced, 2 pins, no cast. And the doctor said, look, if you listen to your mom and dad, I'm not going to cast it. It'll heal twice as fast. And true to form, it did. And every week we had to go in and get x-rayed because her body, remember, we always say your unconscious mind has a perfect blueprint, right? And that 14-degree break just did that and went perfectly straight like that in literally weeks, 5 or 6 weeks. So that was my first experience of that collective healing. And I wasn't conversant in Lynn McTaggart back there, but it was amazing. And then my son, my 27-year-old, when he was 18, had a skiing accident. And when they found him, he was what they call persistently unconscious. They couldn't stimulate him physically with light or with sound. For you guys who know the Glasgow coma scale, he was at a 3, which is the lowest score you can get. They airlifted him to Vancouver General Hospital. He was in a coma for 30 hours. He had 3 small bleeds on his brain that they didn't have to relieve. And he had broken his first rib way up high, which is impossible to break. I mean, you know, I couldn't, if I tried to break somebody's first rib, I couldn't get at it. It's impossible to get in there. He broke that, and he had motor damage all down his right side. And for some reason, you know, so many people, when they get hurt or when a family member gets hurt, they retract and hide. They keep it private within their family. You know, Billy's hurting. And I had a big Rolodex. I still have a fairly big Rolodex, you know, in LinkedIn and other sources. And I just put a message out that all you guys know my son, Andrew, you know, he's on the national team. He is really, really, really hurt, and he needs your positive intentions. I put that out. And then one of the fathers on the team, a Catholic, came to me, and he was part of the Catholic parish in New Westminster, BC. Huge parish. And he said, can we pray to your son's health? And I said, yeah, absolutely, because I'd already had this experience with my daughter years before. And he said, you need to know what this means. Our parish is like 3,000 active parishioners, and we pray nightly. We will pray nightly to your son. I said, well, bring it. And then we lived in a community with the biggest Baptist church in southern British Columbia. Again, 2,500 active parishioners, and they started praying for Andrew. And then a friend of mine went to Napa Valley, and she's part of a meditation group, and 50 people in Napa Valley meditated to my son's good health. And I was in his room that day when they did that, and I imagined a beam of light coming out of Napa Valley all the way into British Columbia and down in his room. So, you know, Andrew got some other beautiful things. He got energy healers, craniosacral, DHA, every omega oil known to man, branched chain amino acids. He was hurt on February 1st or 2nd. They released him on April 7th. And the doctor, the PhD neuroscientist, and her team reviewed his file 3 times before the exit interview and said we had to re-look at his diagnosis because it isn't possible, not possible that he's leaving today. With his driver's license, under his own recognizance, everything. We're letting him out. And so, you know, the power of intention when Tara was studying at her university course and I read it, it brought me back to all of that, Simone. It brought me back to Emma. It brought me back to Andrew. And then it was ironic when, and I don't wish for anything to happen to people's families, but when your daughter fell off the horse, I said, well, of course, it would happen while we're in this group in the middle of the winter or middle of the spring. It's like, it wouldn't happen when we weren't here. Of course it has to happen here, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And there have been some phenomenal turnarounds in that group. My one friend's mother was diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. 4 months later, they said, we don't really think it's liver cancer. And now it's a bile duct disorder in like 8 months. And she was in our program 3 times, her mom. I actually was camping with her this summer, and we're sitting around a campfire. Nobody acknowledges it, right? And I don't want it acknowledged. But I was sitting by the campfire, and she sat beside me. She's probably 10 or 12 years older than me. And we were sitting by the fire, leaning forward, looking at the flames. And she just said really, really quietly, tell Tara that I'm really grateful for what you guys do. That was it. All done. Enough said, right? Enough said. Anyway, so let's open it up to question and answer. Let's hear what you guys have to say today. Nothing? You're all quiet? That's not like you guys.
So I have a question, because I'm running into this right now, is I'm renewing my insurance. And I have a choice of having my insurance. I've got my coaching insurance. And so I'm just looking at switching companies. And I asked if they covered NLP and coaching and a practitioner work. And he said, yeah, they do. They cover it under a mental health practitioner, or they can do it under a life coach practitioner. So, understanding completely what you say, Alan, and I've seen the impact of the work, and I know the impact of belief. The piece that I noted when I talked to the insurance agent, he says, you have to be very careful, because if you claim you can heal something and somebody doesn't get what is deemed the appropriate care from a medical doctor, understanding what Alan has just shared, that you're potentially liable.
You're absolutely liable.
Yeah. So, and they've had some really difficult cases with that. So, one of the things that I just want to mention is I've got a medical background, so I kind of know that area of the gamut. And I think although we know what we know, we understand the beliefs and how they can change your belief in your client and your client's belief. We potentially, our clients put a lot of faith in us, and we can influence them. And one thing I would just say is, it's really important to make sure you've got your bases covered. That means if somebody's coming to you and says, well, I'm not seeing my doctor because of this or that, or, I've got cancer and I'm looking for somebody to help heal that cancer, that's a very sort of legal line that we have to be careful of, and make sure that you document that you have referred them back to their doctor. Doesn't mean that you can't support them, but just to make sure that you've got the documentation that you have done what's deemed appropriate. Because what happens is, if somebody dies because of the cancer, and it's not noted that you referred them to the doctor, they've had family members come after the practitioners. And they have to back things up. So it's just making sure your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted, and just be a little cautious about how you make the claims, right?
So in this group, we talk openly, but let's be really clear. In your NLP training at your prac and master prac, it's really clear. We don't cure anything. We ameliorate the symptoms of things. So let's be really, and if you look at our contracts, you look at our website, when the controlled active psychotherapy came in 2 years ago, last January, I had to take everything down about how I work with people with trauma.
Yeah.
Because as a coach, legally, what I'm allowed to do is do crisis intervention and coaching to ameliorate the symptoms. And that's what all my contracts say. That's what my website says. And our contract, actually, the second paragraph says, if you're under doctor's supervision, you will be required to provide a letter to us authorizing that we go forward, right? So we never, ever, and even more importantly, right, I know some people who talk about, talking to their clients about getting off their meds or whatever, and I'm pretty blatant, I'm pretty open. I say, look, all my clients get off their meds if they choose, under their doctor's supervision. So if you're feeling better, what I would recommend you do is go tell your doctor, I'm feeling better. Can I be reevaluated? I'd like to get off my meds, right? And we've dealt with quite a few people with cancer. And again, we're really clear, right? We're really clear that we don't replace Western medicine. What we are is complementary and extreme. And we explain very carefully the role that emotions play in healing, right? That when you're emotionally down, your immune system is down, and that's widely accepted everywhere. So what we can help you do is manage your emotional states. And the very diagnosis of things like trauma can be traumatizing on the client or on the client's family or their loved ones. And so we can help alleviate that trauma. Right? And that's
So that,
what we're really
I just
clear.
wanted to just bring forth, because that's something I'm dealing with right now, and I've got a really strong medical background.
Yep.
And so, you need to, the biggest thing is make sure you've got a release form that is very clear about what you do and what you don't do. And then if there's a medical situation, especially, my concern is always around anxiety, depression. When somebody has a diagnosis of anxiety or depression, is medically that's looked at it one way. We look at it a slightly different way.
Well, to be really clear, in Ontario, as a coach, you cannot deal with depression or anxiety.
That's right. That's
They
right.
are a diagnosis. You can deal with some of the symptoms. You can teach coping techniques, but you can't deal with anything as a life coach that is a diagnosed disorder. That's why even PTSD, the D in disorder, puts it outside my range. But I can do crisis intervention if a person's up the crazy tree, and I can get them out the crazy tree, and then do life coaching to ameliorate symptoms.
Yeah. So it's, I would like to see a little bit of languaging that we as a practitioner group can use, because I've got a medical background and I have challenges around, what's appropriate, what's not. I know you'd probably need to get some legal advice on that type of thing, but it would be nice to have some sort of context or some guidelines, because I know the work we do is profound.
Yeah, I think the language we use is important. I think you said something that's equally important. The client needs to sign something acknowledging what you do. So our contract includes clauses that tells them we do NLP, we do timeline therapy, we do hypnosis. It's different, it's complementary, and every client signs those things, right? They're always signed, and we go through them. We probably should look at, again, spending more time at the front end. When we got going fast and we had Sam's doing the admin, maybe the contracts weren't gone through. The two naturopaths online here probably face some of that too, right?
Yeah, I would have a lot to say on that, if anyone has any questions about it, because even as a regulated healthcare provider in two different professions, I always communicate to my patients that I'm part of their care team, and I'm not a replacement for anyone. And I'm frequently referring them back to the appropriate people who have within their scope whatever their needs are, right? So, and I also deal with, because I don't prescribe any medication, so I'm often dealing with letting people know that we're working on underlying causes of how, what their concerns are, that there may be a point where they want to revisit that discussion with the prescribing doctor so that they can come off medication if they choose.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the languaging is really, really important, because the more in the languaging, number two, having a signed form, because if it's family does not know necessarily the conversation that has been had between yourself and your client. So this is just some of the little challenges that I'm showing up that, I said to the insurance company, I want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear on what you need to make sure I've got appropriate coverage, because I'm starting to deal with a lot of people who have had pretty significant emotional events, and sometimes they hit a wall, and you've got to be able to hold space for that. And sometimes people turn around and they say, I don't want to do anything else for a little bit, and that's their choice. So how do you just make sure that you're professionally sort of supported around your languaging and your documentation?
Yeah, I think the wider your scope of practice too, the more careful you have to be. Again, for me, I'm so narrowly focused on what I do and the assessments and who I work with that I can get my language concise and tight really easily. the wider your practice, the more challenge it is, right? The wider your challenge, the harder it is.
I would also add to always working with a lawyer who understands the work that you do and your scope of practice to separate things out. So for example, being part of a regulated or two regulated healthcare professions, my coaching contract was written by a lawyer and is separate and clearly distinguishes that when I'm working in that capacity as a coach, I am the coach. I am not the acupuncturist. I'm not the naturopathic doctor in that capacity.
Nice.
Do you have any recommendations for any lawyers or something that you'd recommend?
Where are you located?
Ontario.
Okay, yeah, I have a great lawyer that I'm happy to refer you to. She's a lawyer who works with a lot of women-owned businesses and coaches, and has a really good understanding of that. And she does a lot of online work herself, so she has a good sense of that.
What is the best way to contact you around that? Or is there?
I'll put it in the chat.
That'd be awesome. Thank you, Tara.
Yeah, for sure.
Appreciate it.
Rachel, you had something to throw in on that?
Yeah, I had a lawyer who was working in a online coaches business program that I was in. A lawyer who was helping coaches online figure out their contracts and templates for all kinds of legal documents. She's New York based, but similarly to what Tara is saying, she has a lot of flexibility in who she can help. So I can also share that name.
Thank you.
What is the chat, the video chat, or is there another?
There's just a
video?
chat at the bottom. If you look down, there's a text box at the bottom.
Okay, here.
If you want to throw some data in there, it's awesome.
Thanks.
And one other question I have, Alan, is is there anything that you change when you're working with clients from the States?
I don't personally.
Because the insurance company that I have been with that I'm switching out of wanted to specifically for any international clients, they wanted a specific form filled out. So if you start working with, especially people who are doing so much online, it's worthwhile looking into your insurance company. They need a special form when you're out of country. So I work with people in Germany and the States quite frequently. And so they required a specific form from me filled out, and every client needs to fill that out who's out of country. So and basically saying that if there is any legal action taken that it has to be done in the province of Ontario, Canada.
Yeah.
So there's things like that I mean, I wouldn't have known about other than my insurance company actually stepped forward and said that's what I required. So I don't know if that helps anybody if they're working online.
That's the other thing, though. Go back to PRAC and Master PRAC. We're really clear that there is a, people ask us all the time, can we have your agreement? And we say, no, you've got to go to a lawyer and have your own agreement drawn up. Because even Tara and I, if we shared our agreement and you cut our names at the top and pasted yours in, then you got in trouble, we would be in the line of fire, and we're just not prepared to do that.
Yeah,
right?
Fair enough.
Yeah. So you have to get legal counsel on everything you do.
Thank you for that. So yeah, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to have that conversation with everybody, because it's something that I'm sort of I find a bit challenging, and it causes me a little bit of angst in the sense that I'm not worried about it, but I just want to make sure I do it properly.
Yeah, I had a piece of what I would call sage advice early in my business career. And I was working in the States. So I was like a duck out of water, right? I had an office in Phoenix and an office in San Diego and one in Vancouver. And I hired this lawyer who was a PhD in psychology and a PhD in law, kind of an interesting guy. And Russ would write things. Russ Davis is his name in San Diego. He runs an organization called San Diego Law. And Russ, I would say, schooled me in law. He schooled me in law. And Russ's advice to me was, Alan, what you need to trust me is when we stand in front of the master, because it's always possible to get challenged. It doesn't matter how good your paperwork is.
Yeah.
If somebody lays a claim against you, it doesn't matter what your paperwork is. What you need to be confident of is that when you stand in front of the master, that you did nothing wrong by intent or by practice. He said, so if you can stand in front of the master and said, I do this and this and this, and I did it for these reasons, and they were honorable and they weren't misdirective or they weren't or misinformation. He said, and that's the way we'll run your business, right? And that was a beautiful schooling. He got it right out of because boy, you can get in the, whereas, and all the whereases, right? And so you have to find a lawyer who you trust, and then you have to behave in a way that if you're in front of a judge, like I've kept our doors open all through COVID. And I've said openly, if I get in front of a judge and one of my clients is tanking, I am a necessary business. Right? I would argue that in front of a judge. So, if my client comes in and they're emotionally breaking down and they're climbing walls and they want to see me and they coach and they calm down and they're happy and they're glad that they worked with me. If the coach, and I'm prepared, just me, to stand in front of a judge, say I did it. I deemed I was necessary because we are, we're in the gray zone, right? As coaches, we weren't deemed necessary or unnecessary. Like the naturopaths have a college. The college stepped on them, right? The college said what you're going to do. The psychotherapist, the massage therapist, the physiotherapists all had colleges that would direct them. Life coaches, we don't have a college. And when you read the controlled active psychology where we live, all it says is what coaches are allowed to do, but we don't report to that body about when we can be open or not open. Right? We can be open.
To be quite honest with you, one of my challenges was I've been a massage therapist for 10 years, and I had a lawyer client implied that I did some damage, and I had to go to a discovery session with her, and basically they said that the client is always right, and they sorted things out, but they said you're absolutely 100% credible because I know exactly what I do and exactly what I don't, and I could tell them step by step. I took good notes, but I wouldn't wish anybody going to a discovery session unless they had to go to that. So it's very stressful.
Court is not about the truth. Court is not about the truth. It is theatrics, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's your confidence and a bunch of things that go in there, but it's it can be pretty unnerving. It was an exercise in emotional management for sure. Because
the other thing is that, in your contract, if we're going to talk contracts for a minute, like we're really clear, if people don't do their tasking, there are repercussions, right? And I've had a mother ask for a refund on behalf of her daughter, and I said no. And she said, well, you promised we could get a refund if she didn't get the results. I said yes. And she said, well, she didn't get the results. I said no, she left the program. But at the moment she left the program, and I listed all the results she had gotten, right? She left the program early. We'd cleared 5 traumas. They went from SUDS 10 down to SUDS low. She had the activity card that she reported in on every day. That activity card is a beautiful piece of tool, right? The client's day after day after day reporting in her improvement. And then she said, I didn't get any results. She starts out at 2s and 3s, and 3 weeks later, she's at 7, 8s, 9s, and 10s. And I had 12 or 15 things that I listed off to the mother. I said, so she was very successful. What she chose to do is leave the program.
Right.
So taking notes, well, one thing you said, and a lot of coaches don't take good notes. I'm aware of that. And again, I'm always pitching PACE, but the PACE manual, it has every step that you did in it, when you did it, how you did it, what the result was, plus the activity card, plus the PS or the ZTPI.
I have to tell you, I have to say that PACE protocol was absolutely fantastic. I don't know if everybody else has taken it. One of the things I absolutely make sure I do is when I go periodically as I go through, probably twice while I go through the process.
I'm trying to get my camera to focus.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't know if that was a stop.
No.
Is I make sure I go back to the evidence and the goals, and I make sure I've got them marked out of it where they started. So they started at a 0 out of 10 and what they wanted to accomplish. And I make sure I mark down where they are progression wise, because there's an awareness that happens with that. And so if they ever came back and said, well, I really haven't, I don't feel like I've progressed and you didn't do what you promised, I'm like, we've gone through this and you've gone from a 0 to a 4 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10, and you're 10 out of 10 now. So there's that consistent proof that you can, the consistency that you have is a powerful tool for you to stand behind with confidence. So that marking their progression out of a scale of 0 to 10, I have found I just don't write it down. I actually rate them. Every piece of the evidence that they want. And when they're not moving forward in one area, we focus a little bit more on that.
I do that too,
So-
Simone.
Pardon me?
I do that as well. I have the 0 to 10, and at every session, starting about the third session, I
Yep.
start every time writing down where they are out of 10.
It's also a powerful awareness, but it's the proof that you've got and you're tracking well. And if you've got good notes and you have to go into a discovery session for anything, and you've got good notes, it's nothing they can argue with. You know, and remember, somebody's idea of damage or whatever they're talking about, even on the legal aspect, is a perspective also. So.
At the end of the day, if you're working with a lot of people, knowing who your client is and getting that relationship down at the beginning will minimize your lawsuits. And Tara and I have had some altercations with people, have never escalated to lawsuits. And part of it is the documentation of what we do. And part of it is the expectation, managing the expectations at the beginning. I've seen too many NLP coaches promise the moon, when really all they're going to get is a ride at Canada's Wonderland, right? You're not going to get to the moon. So in the beginning of NLP, it was really bad. Everybody in NLP thought NLP could fix everything. So I think, managing the expectations on what you're going to do for the person right from the beginning. And as Simone said, articulate what they believe they're going to get and then how they're making progress on that is a way.
I've sort of learned the hard way through registered massage as well. Is like, you've got to document things, because sometimes they want a note sent to them, or they want a reference sent or something like that. You have to refer out, and you've got to have good notes. That's what protects you.
Yeah.
And them, because sometimes they've got a skewed idea of things as well. So.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you for that.
Yeah. The interesting thing about it is a person who comes to an NLP clinic. No, I don't know how many hundreds of clients Tara and I have. We're jokingly thinking we're north of 500 now, but I don't care what the number is, if it's 300 or 500. The people who come through our doors seeking help from us at the price point we charge, they understand that they're outside the box, right? They're seeking something alternative, and I think that and then when we actually accept them as a client because the fit is good, the chance of repercussion starts getting very, very small. I think in anything that's, especially when you're in soft tissue damage, which is hard to prove either way. And you're in the mainstream. When we look at MD, sometimes we look at MD sites where you see complaints. Like there's a psychiatrist here in town that just opened up a new office. And I looked at her Google profile and she has a 2.7 out of 5. Holy cow. On her Google reviews. And she has quite a few reviews, 2.7 out of 5. That's just over 50%. I would have, if I was her, I'd have lots of legal documentation on my side. Tara, talk to everybody. Let them hear your seal voice. I told everybody you had a seal voice tonight. She's not there. She's not there. Other questions? Who has another question? Lee.
Hello. Following up, Simone, thanks for bringing all of that up. And I just had a question because I have a potential client overseas, and you touched on that. And I just wanted to know a little bit more as far as what you found out as far as contract, how that needs to be different. I missed that piece. Oh, you're on mute, Simone.
So it was something that the insurance company mentioned. So I made sure I told them that I was working with clients out of country.
Oh, okay.
And they said, this is what we need when you work with clients out of country.
Okay. So just checking with the insurance
Yeah,
company.
she actually sent me the documentation and what they needed filled out. And I just adjusted it, put my name in or put the client's name in.
Okay.
So you'd have to, and it depends on your insurer.
Okay.
One of the biggest issues, Lee, is if your insurer is paying and indemnifying you and helping pay your legal costs if you get sued, if you're working with somebody in Switzerland and they sue you in Switzerland and you have to defend yourself in Switzerland, that multiplies the cost by ginormously. So every contract, normally when you're working with international clients or even interprovincially, if you have a client in Manitoba, your client should say that if there are any disputes arising from the contract, they will be dealt with in the province of Ontario.
Okay.
So you don't end up having to fly to Manitoba or Washington or BC to defend yourself, right? It adds tons.
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks.
And that the contract is governed by the laws of Ontario, not the laws where they live.
Okay.
But
So
your lawyer will give you the exact clause for that.
Okay.
The other piece that came up with my insurer today is I have a choice of putting NLP under mental health practitioner or life coach, which I thought was really interesting. I said, well, technically I'm not a mental health practitioner. He goes, well, you are in our books. And I'm like, you know what? But if that goes to court, I've just signed something saying I'm a mental health practitioner.
I would never, ever just look at Sally's head. No.
Yeah, I agree. I feel the same way. So I'm just saying this because I was like, I would much prefer, I said, technically I'm a life coach. I'm an NLP coach. I'm not a mental health practitioner. I said, I'm from the medical background, that would be frowned upon for a coach, assuming to be a mental health practitioner. Yes, I deal with stress and I deal with some of the mental health things, but I'm not a licensed mental health practitioner. He goes, well, we work with a lot of people who are unlicensed mental health practitioners. I said, I don't even want to go there.
Well, they might work with them in Ontario in the Controlled Active Psychotherapy. There is no designation for unlicensed mental health care worker.
Exactly.
There's none in the psychology regulations of Ontario. Maybe in some other jurisdictions like Colorado has unlicensed mental health care workers, but not Ontario, not where we live.
So
Does
that's
it-
another little thing to be careful of. And there are a lot of, for the licensed mental health care workers, if you put anything on your website, they can basically throw you out to the wolves. So if I'm a registered massage therapist, right now I'm, what do you call it? I'm not active, I'm inactive. So I'm not actually doing massage, I'm still keeping my license. But if I was to drop my license and say I provide massage therapy, they can hang me out to dry. I can't use massage therapy, massage therapist. I've got to be very, very careful how I use that languaging. And if we're on this end, we don't always know the implications of how we present ourselves on our websites, information that we're sharing, and how people share us or perceive us, right? So I think it's something that we just need to be, the languaging we need to be a little bit aware of, that's all.
I don't have my insurance forms in front of us, but the organization we work, I'm damn near 99% sure it says NLP practitioner and NLP trainer. It
Yeah.
says nothing about, we don't call ourselves life coaches. So,
Well, so that would be interesting for me. These guys either work under life coach or mental health worker.
yeah, I'll have to look. Rachel, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm just taking in all of these thoughts. I am getting certified as a healing shame practitioner. It's like a really long course, but it doesn't license me. It's another certification. So I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to call myself, because I'm a licensed trauma recovery coach, then the healing shame practitioner, and the NLP practitioner, but for trauma. So
Even the license you have for the trauma recovery coach is not a recognized mental health care practitioner.
yeah, it's just a certification.
It's a certification, yeah. And so, in the state of New York, if you looked up the whatever their active psychotherapy is, it'll give all the designations in
Okay,
it.
that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Every jurisdiction will have a regulation around psychotherapy, because there's been a war within the psychiatry field. Psychiatrists used to rule all, and then the psychologists broke free, and the psychologists controlled the psychotherapist, and the psychotherapist broke free. So now, like in Ontario, we have, the College of Psychiatry, College of Psychology, and the College of Psychotherapists, and the College of everything else. Colleges. Somebody asked something about a client. Come on.
I have questions.
Yes, Tara.
So I had a client recently, and I asked the question about X equals Y, and she agreed that. So I asked her, if you feel 100 times more inadequate, will you feel 100 times better and stay 100 times more grounded? And she said, yes. And I was like, okay. I'm like, so I just moved on, and I asked her after to try to reframe it a little bit. What if there was another way, rather than feeling inadequate, that you could actually feel better and feel more grounded? But I'm just wondering how you might handle that if loosening the model of the world didn't quite work out that way.
So as you sit back, as you listen to yourself ask that question just now, imagine being a fly on the wall and hearing you ask that question. If you felt 100 times more inadequate, would you be 100 times more grounded? And her saying yes. The conscious mind likes to be clever, right, and smart, but it's also very, very, that it just likes to be clever, right, and smart. And when you said it, it's like my brain went, oh, she answered with her conscious mind. So somehow you had broken rapport, and she'd come out past her reticular activating system. You were back on the conscious side of the RAS. That's my initial thought, because you can't substantiate it. Nobody logically could substantiate that. She couldn't, she can't hold that position. It doesn't hold water.
I would ask her to like really, really respectfully and seriously ask her how. Like what that would look like, and have her describe it, and just keep pushing her, right, until she recognizes that it's not actually a good solution, because you want her to come to, you can't be telling her that she's wrong, right? You can't be the one telling her that doesn't work. So you need to go with her. You need to just, it's like, that whole keto thing. So you go with her energy and her response and everything, have her describe it, until all of a sudden it will become evident to her that it's not actually a good strategy at all. And then she'll realize it. And then you can come up with another solution together.
Awesome.
When you're grounded, what does that look like? Or when you're feeling inadequate, what does that look like? How do you do it? And if you're 100 times more inadequate, what would that look like? How would you do it? And I'm 100% sure Tara's right. She would no longer feel grounded. Yeah, that instant response is like a boom. That's neat. I love that. Other questions? Sally's going for her mic.
Simone, I really appreciate all the information you brought. I hope I never have to worry about that going to any kind of a discovery meeting. I have a client who has 3 children, and she divorced her husband when her children were 2, 4, and 6. She married him when she was 17 and he was 40. And she married him because her parents liked him and she wanted to get out of the house. Abusive, condescending, berating, a terrible, terrible person in terms of the way he treated his wife and his children. So she divorced him. Had no money. He refused to give her money. She lived in the basement of a house. All 4 people slept in one bed. At this point, her children are 17, 15, and 13. She is teaching at a private school. She is in her 3rd year of college. And when she came to me, she wouldn't even make eye contact. So at this point, she's not wanting to talk to her husband and her ex-husband, and he is seeing that she is finding peace and her children are listening to her and doing beautifully. The eldest daughter just got into college on a full scholarship. And so he wants to meet with me. I don't want to meet with him.
What does he want? He wants the change you helped her get?
No, I think he's very angry that she has become independent and her children are starting to come into their own.
So he doesn't want to see you for help. He wants to see you.
Yeah, Sally, don't see him.
Now, professionally, how do I say that? I'm
No.
Conflict of interest.
Tara,
Conflict of interest.
No.
no, yeah.
Confidentiality privileges there that he doesn't have access to. Like, that's just illegal, ethical. It's a solid no. Like,
Yeah.
Thank
The
you.
confidential, like, there's nothing you can have a good conversation with them anyway. It's a confidentially, it's a conflict of interest.
Sure.
yeah.
You could
I
ask him
take
to
my
write to you,
confidentiality
Sally.
so seriously that I wouldn't even tell like a husband that his wife was coming in for an appointment that same day. Like, that's how seriously I take that type of confidentiality.
Right.
That's like,
Right.
Sally, if he
Well,
had
and it's the
questions for you,
ex-wife. Say that again, Tara.
if he had questions for you, I would invite him to send an email to you if he has specific questions in regards to himself. Ask him to send it in an email, and I would let him know that if it's possible, you will answer them. But if there's any conflict of interest at all or any confidentiality, then you won't be able to answer. But I would certainly, there's no harm in getting an email and then, assess from there, but definitely don't see him. Yeah.
Okay. Would it be okay to suggest a couple therapists other than myself?
Yes, all day long. Refer like mad. You would, I think it's really, really useful for you to say, you know what, here's a few people who do exactly what I do. Here's some people that maybe, that you could try. Like, definitely make sure you offer help in that way. I mean, no matter who it is, right? Whether it's like, it doesn't matter who it is. You never want to just say no to somebody and then have them and just say no, right? You always want to suggest to them that they may want to see X, Y, or Z person. Even if you're not referring a specific person, you may, like, if I get somebody who contacts me about a son who's schizophrenic or something, I don't have a specific person that I know well enough to refer them to, and it's certainly out of our scope, but I would still say, that's out of my scope. You likely want to contact a professional mental health, specialist or a psychiatrist to work with, and, here's the website or whatever for whatever your local public health is.
Sally, I'd refer him to Alan.
Don't refer him to Alan.
Yeah, I agree. Refer him really quickly.
Sign language. Well, I've referred many people out, and I have, chosen not to take certain clients. But this guy, after what I do know of him from his ex-wife and how his children are, I don't trust him. So I'm waiting for him to call the state,
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course, Rachel.
Yeah, I just want to mention that I know that you guys have been doing this forever and ever and have referred people, and your careers are to help others. Like Tara was saying, like, number one, refer him. But it feels like a loud voice in my head saying, you absolutely don't have to engage with him if you don't want to. You're not required to say jack shit to him if you don't want to. And don't push yourself.
I like the email idea, Tara, because then I don't even have to talk with him. I can, if he emails me, which
Exactly.
I hope he doesn't, but I will be professional and, refer him on. And yeah.
Tara and I used to do quite a bit of work with husbands and wives, right? The wife would come in, have massive results with Tara, and then recommend that their husband come work with me. And, we're coaches. We're more open than psychotherapists. We're more open when we meet people. We're just more open. And a couple times it came back to bite us. And we just got to the point where I won't work with the husbands of Tara's clients anymore. I'll refer them out right away. Even in a coaching role, even if they're my perfect client, I don't want them in the room. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Because Tara and I work in a small shop. I can't not know what's going on in my own shop, right? What happens behind closed doors is still behind closed doors, but I know his wife's been here on what days, and right. So I just don't do it. So I won't even see. And we used to have quite a few couples in here, but I won't do it anymore. It's too tough to manage. So I certainly would never recommend this. As Tanya said, just the onus you put on yourself of never divulging anything as you work through his issues. He's explaining stuff to you that another side to. I don't know how you'd manage it. So yeah, I think the consensus, everybody say no. Just say no.
The problems too, Sally, and no disrespect, Tara, but I've had difficult clients who are very, very pushy. I had a guy the other day said, I'll pay you $10,000 just to listen to me. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It's not.
Why didn't you refer him to me? 10 grand, I'll listen to anybody. Jesus.
Seriously, he was like, just, and I said, I said, I will be out of integrity if I took you on as a client, and I am going to give you, I'd like to refer you to somebody who I think you can help. And he goes, no, well, the issues I'm having with so-and-so, who I did know the person. And he said, I don't want to work with anybody else. They're going to think I'm crazy. And I said, I understand where you're coming from. So before we go any further, I finally said, go get a piece of paper and a pen. Before we have any further discussion, go get a piece of paper and a pen, which he did. And I said, I want you to write down this number. And I said, I know you sent me an email. I'm going to send this email with this number to you, as well as the email address for somebody I would refer you to. And I would invite you strongly to give them a call, because I am not the person who can support or help you optimally. And it's not in your best interest to work with me. So Sally, for you, it's like, it sounds to me like he's not looking for help himself. He sounds like he's looking for, you've got the gist of his energy. So even starting to do an email, this guy even emailed me back. He says, well, do you know her sister? And I'm like, no, we're not having any more conversation. Right. But I didn't even start that up, and I didn't even open the door for that, because I wasn't prepared to follow through with it. And Tara may be differently in the way she deals with it, but if you've got that feeling that energy is happening, he's aggressive, and I think you know where that's heading already, and you're gonna sooner or later you're gonna have to say no.
Right? And I'm not going to have a problem saying no. What I need to do is I need to get rid of this fear that I'm going to end up being taken to the state,
Well, your duty is to refer him to somebody else if he wants some help. That's your duty, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've taken notes on everything everyone has said, and these one-liners are perfect. And I like the no part. No.
I'm sorry, but that is against my philosophy or integrity or whatever that piece is, whatever you choose, or if there's a legal backup that you can use, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Sally.
Yeah.
Think about what you said for a moment, please. I have a fear of being taken to state.
I know.
But just stay with me for a minute. Okay. Engage the fear. So if you have a fear of getting taken to state, that's his decision. And if he takes you to state without any information from you, that's one scenario. So you have no contact, you share nothing, you don't make any mistakes. You choose to see him, and you make one mistake. You say one wrong thing. Now he takes you to state and he's got ammo. If he's going to take you to state, he's going to take you to state. If that's going to happen, go in the strongest place. And the strongest place, if you go to state, is never having talked to him, from my perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Sally, it's actually none of his business that you've been dealing with his wife, and it's not up to you to even admit that you're working with his wife. That's a breach of confidentiality, and say, I don't discuss client situations.
Right.
I don't discuss.
Did I miss how you found out that he wanted to talk to you? Who told you that?
Well, his children. I see the children, and the children told him that they're going to a counselor, and they're they're loving the new rules at home because they're consistent and they're concrete, and mom's happy and they're happy, and and he can't sabotage things now. And so I think he's pissed.
And these are adult children, right? Or teenage children that can make their own medical decisions and choices. So you don't even have to talk to him about them as well.
I don't. Now the law says, because they are minor children, that the parents have the authority to see how the children are doing and to ask questions. But I deal only with the wife.
But there's something around, there's not an age attached to this in Canada, as far as I understand, that people of a certain age, if determined reasonable enough, can make their own medical decisions. And I've seen it as early as 12.
Right. No, in terms of medical decisions, I think that it's 17 in the States.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 17 in the States, but these kids have grown up in such a feral way. I mean, they're feral children. They lived in the basement for like 6 years, never went out. And they're all now in school. I mean, it's really a good thing, but yeah.
You may, given the complexity, if he has some rights to know the children's psychological health, and they're going to a licensed mental health care worker, some part of the Florida law may give him the right to talk to you about his kids, not about his wife, but his kids. But you probably have the right to have a witness present when you're talking to him about his kids.
I probably would, whether I didn't or not, definitely. But
Yeah.
Now that I'm hearing all this, what were you going to say, Tara?
I was just going to throw in my Pollyanna sort of, which is honestly, I would not approach this guy as though he's going to be aggressive. I really think, honestly, everything that we live and breathe and believe in doing this work is that if you anticipate that he's going to be nasty and this is all, you've only heard stories, and I understand the stories are terrible. We also know that everyone has a positive intention. And if this guy is a narcissist, the worst possible thing to do is to humiliate him, right? And so if you shut him down without so much as giving him the opportunity to say anything, the possibility of, because you're assuming, right? So again, it's totally Pollyanna on my part, but I would at the very least, just sort of, if he does reach out to you, you don't have to acknowledge anything. You don't have to acknowledge working with his children, his wife, or whatever, but you can be open to receiving what he's looking for, because there is still the possibility. I mean, this guy is not going to be a walking monster, right? He's going to be a human being who has all sorts of flaws and, problems and everything else, right? But he may end up, asking you something that is a fair question, right? And if he has seen something, if your sense is that it's that he's pissed off, chances are he'll attempt to manipulate before he will get aggressive and in your face, right? And you're not going to do anything silly like see him in person or engage in any other way, but just again, I'm not talking legally at all here, but I would go in with that assumption of like, if you can be open to the first engagement and then trust yourself. And I know you well enough, Sally, to know that like, if that first engagement seems as though it's going to go in a wrong direction, then you have reason and right to just cut communication with a really, really, really sentient way of doing it. And who knows, you may be able to I don't know.
How many family situations did you deal with in your high school career as a counselor?
Thousands.
There
Yeah.
you go. There's not a better counselor able to handle the situation than you. Yeah.